I think our panelists look ready today. So, I was going to say good morning, but I do believe it's the afternoon now. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shalimar Gonzalez, and I serve as the CEO of Solid Ground, and it's super exciting to have you here. We've got a wonderful group of folks behind me as our panelists that are going to be having a conversation, which we can all engage in as audience members around the systems and unraveling and untangling the safety nets and navigating the safety net systems that we have in place. And so we're really excited about this conversation. These social justice salons have really been an opportunity for us as an organization to bring folks with lived experience, to bring service providers together, to bring community members together, to have a conversation about what does it mean to be an anti-racist organization? What does that mean for us as humans? What does that mean for folks that are in need of services? And then how do we come together to improve systems and services? And so these conversations have been great this year. We're looking forward to having more of these conversations next year. We hope that you'll be able to join us. And I am going to stop talking because really the experts are on the stage with me. So I'm going to hand it over to Neal Simpson, who's going to introduce our folks today, and then we'll get everyone started. Thank you all.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Shalimar. My name is Neal. I work on the communications team at Solid Ground. And as Shalimar said, this is our third social justice salon this year, and these are really meant to be community conversations, spaces where we can come together, across organizations and experiences, and explore the challenges that we all face in overcoming and solving poverty, and then sort of build community around potential solutions to those challenges. So. We started the spring with a conversation about permanent supportive housing as a key solution to homelessness. We talked this fall about interrupting generational poverty by supporting kids as they find and pursue their passions. And today we're talking about the safety net and the barriers that are built into the safety net. When we're talking about safety net, we're talking about all of those programs that are supposed to be here for all of us when we find ourselves unable to get enough food to eat or keep the heat or the electricity on or provide basic needs for our families. I think everybody in this room probably knows that these are vital programs, that millions of people rely on them just to survive, but also to build pathways towards stability and self-sufficiency. But that there are also lots of barriers that make it difficult for many people to even access these programs or create so many hurdles that they spend all their time dealing with bureaucracy instead of taking that time to heal and to pursue paths towards stability. So fortunately for us, we have this great panel of just incredible people that are going to explore what these barriers are, why they're here, and what we can do to remove them. I've already talked too much, so I'm going to let them all introduce themselves, starting with Derrick Belgrade, Executive Director of the Chief Seattle Club.
Bonjour, everybody. Derrick Belgrade, Executive Director of the Chief Seattle Club. Like Neal said, I'm an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians of Oregon. I'm also Chippewa Cree from Rocky Boy, Montana. I use he, him pronouns. Really glad to be here. So Chief Seattle Club, what we do at Chief Seattle Club is provide a lot of wraparound social services. Historically, we were a day center, a drop-in shelter for homeless within our community. The last 10 years or so, we've really ramped up and really built up wraparound services. Today, though, we just opened our first housing development project. We opened up in January, so now we're actually housing providers as well. So, yeah, we got a lot of great projects coming up. So, yeah, glad to be here.
I guess I'm going to skip over to Marcy, who's the director, Marcy Bowers, who's the director of the Statewide Poverty Action Network.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marcy. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of the Statewide Poverty Action Network. We were founded in 1996 in response to federal welfare reform. So we can talk all day long. I will not, I promise, about the barriers that were created and built into our system during that process. And currently, we do public policy advocacy at the state level, sourcing our ideas from community members and working with them to lead our campaigns and participate in those advocacy efforts, including around our state safety net. So super happy to be here amongst this amazing crew of people.
Thank you, Marcy. And then we have Kirk McClain, who is a residential case manager at Solid Ground Sandpoint Housing Campus and a former member of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority Governance Committee and the Lived Experience Coalition.
Thanks a lot. Hey, everybody. My name is Kirk McClain. As he said, I'm a case manager, a residential case manager for Solid Ground. I work out at the Sandpoint Naval Base out there. And basically, my job as a case manager is to help folks out there maintain their lifestyle and to hopefully move on to a better living situation, maybe to market rate rental units or something like that. But generally, I'm there to help folks with their benefits, help folks kind of maintain their life, and to try and improve their situation as far as how they live and maybe their goals, those kind of things. And so that's pretty much what I do. I'm glad to be here. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Kirk. And then we have Kim McGillivray, who's a member of Solid Ground's Community Accountability Council.
Yeah, I am. Although today I'm here in my citizen garb as a poor person who frequently has encounters with the social safety net as it's dropping me through its holes.
And then Erin Bryant-Thomas, who's Director of Equity and Justice at the King County Regional Homelessness Authority.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Erin Bryant-Thomas. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm an anti-racist community organizer, and I do have the privilege of serving as the Director of Equity and Justice. I'm originally from San Francisco, been out this way since 2009. And, King County Regional Homelessness Authority is responsible for the homelessness response for the entire county, all 38 cities. And one of the things that I'm striving to bring to our organization is, really actualizing our theory of change and really actualizing our mission and doing that through ensuring that folks feel really confident and competent when we use very bold statements like we're going to center people with lived experience and that we see ourselves as an anti-racist organization. We want people to feel confident in doing that, and we do that through ensuring their competence and through training and being in community, seeing themselves as community members, seeing themselves as community organizers, and really trying to live out those really bold stated goals and initiatives that we have at KCRHA. It's a pleasure to be here and love the work that Solid Ground is doing. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys all for being here. I think we'll start with Marcy. If I know a really key part of what Poverty Action does is you go around the state and you talk to communities living on low income about what they need. And I wonder what you hear from them about the barriers they face most in terms of getting the support they need from our safety net programs.
Sure. I think if I can back up just a tiny bit, we do travel around the state. And we work to go to a whole variety of different communities, so rural communities, urban communities, suburban communities, really trying to get a broad swath of perspectives, kind of with the recognition that policy making probably looks different in different communities. And there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to addressing the needs and the barriers that people are facing. So, I think I hear a lot about barriers, but I think even before I go into barriers, I would say kind of the most common things we hear broadly are that people don't have enough money. And that's probably fairly obvious to all of us. If you're living in poverty and you show up at a listening session, you're probably going to tell the facilitators, I don't have enough money. The most common thing we hear, also probably not a surprise, related to the first is things just cost too much. The costs keep going up and my income doesn't change. The amount that I get from my benefits barely changes things just cost too much. But I think the third most common thing that we hear broadly is that people feel badly treated by the systems meant to serve them. And that's across a wide variety of things. And I know that we'll dig into this. We were doing a little prep in the back, and we talked all about this a few minutes ago. I know we'll dig into that, but I think it's fairly striking, and I think surprising to people who don't work within these systems or don't hear a lot or spend a lot of time with community members who are living in poverty, that it's really hurtful and really traumatizing to have to tell your story over and over and over again, to feel like you're not believed, that maybe you haven't demonstrated that you're destitute enough to deserve some sort of service. Maybe you don't look right. All of those sort of things. Some community members have said, I feel like I didn't know the secret handshake. So some of the barriers, I think a lot of the barriers are sort of wrapped up in that last piece around like programs that are contradictory, their eligibility requirements are contradictory, or at best complicated. Sort of the need to tell the same thing over and over again to multiple different agencies or service providers in order to get kind of the basics covered. So I think we'll dig into that, but I would say those are sort of the very common pieces that we hear about that I think are really sort of bucketed under this umbrella of people feel really treated really badly by the systems meant to serve them. I will tell you, people also say, this is an incredibly valuable service. I just want to be treated better. Don't take this away. Mm-hmm. Please do not hear me saying that I'm treated badly and therefore I don't want the service. I just want to be treated with dignity and respect while I am accessing a service that I am eligible for. So I think that's a really important piece that we hear is about both the value of public benefits or sort of these systems and structures that are meant to serve people, but also that they need to do better. They need to be more accessible. They need to treat people with more dignity and respect. So I could go on, but other people have things that they might want to say too.
Well, and I should have said, we really do intend this to be a community conversation, so please feel free, if you don't happen to be in the panel today, we do want to hear from you. If you have any questions for the panelists, or if you have some thoughts about some of the things we're talking about, please just wave your hand. We have a microphone. We'd love to hear from you. For now, Kim, I know you have a lot of experience navigating these systems. Can you talk a little bit about what that takes and the toll it takes on you in trying to get through these?
Yeah, actually, the dignity piece is a big piece. Early on, when I was a single mother to 2 small children and didn't want them to know that Daddy got custody of the money, I went to a food bank while they were in school so they would never have to see that. While I was there, the gentleman from a church I shall not name were helping the folks load up bags with groceries. And one young man took up a can of soup and waggled it and said, "Who wants soup?" And I set down my bag and I had to leave because the price of that can was just too high for me that day. To be mocked in my need was too much. And it was so unnecessary and so thoughtless. I was still capable at that point of being shocked. So I left, and then I thought, oh, you've really screwed yourself. What are we going to do for dinner tonight? But sometimes there's a line that gets drawn that you just can't cross. And that day, that was that for me. Tomorrow, I will go to a community service office of DSHS to prove to them that, yes, I'm still poor enough to qualify for food stamps. I have to do this 3 times a year because I have little part-time intermittent gigs with King County elections, a job that I think is important. I verify signatures on ballots. It matters. So I do that for 3 weeks, 3 times a year. Every time I do it, I'm earning like $400 a week, so I'm no threat to Elon Musk. But I get notified by DSHS that I've earned too much money this month, so no more food stamps for you. And I have to go back in and say, here's the letter I had to ask my employer to write for me, because being poor is just one continuous public proctology exam. And so here's my life. I told them why I needed this. So it's specific to you. It says, please allow her to keep food stamps. Her intermittent employment has ended, and she is no longer earning any money as of this date. And they always reinstate me. And I'm like, isn't there some way you can put in a note that when you see King County elections next to my name, it's a really short-time gig? And they're like, no. And I'm thinking, why not? It's a computer. It stores data. Why? But that's too much to ask. And the day after that, I get to go to a seminar where I will learn to fight my landlord. Because I got some rent help for the moratorium we had for, 2-ish years there? And there was a waiver the landlord signed that said, okay, in return for us accepting this check, it's a waiver on trying to get recompense for anything else that may have been owed during that period. But ever since then, they've been bothering me for $268 that they said wasn't covered. And I'm like, there is nothing in the waiver that says except ... It says everything else is gone. You're reset at 0. And I have paid rent in full and on time ever since that. Where did you get $268? And they're like, well, it was from December of the year before. And I'm like, waiver. And so we've had this conversation 3 or 4 times, and now they're like, we want it by December 1st, or we may have to take further action. And when you are in income-adjusted housing with a Section 8 voucher, further action is not friendly fire. That's a threat. So now I have to go to learn how to negotiate my way through this, or get a county mediator in on my side to say, what do you not understand about this waiver you signed? But I have to do that work. They don't have to do that. They get to send letters. I don't get to send letters. I have to show up. So being poor is a hard job because the work is constant and it's always changing. Things can come out of nowhere, things you didn't expect, like a waiver isn't a waiver, or things you do expect, like, oh, great, here I got this little paycheck, but it's costing me my food stamps for my son and myself, so got to go address that. Anyhow, yeah, it's draining, and it takes away a lot of things. I've learned not to let it take my dignity. I've replaced that with anger.
It's a full-time job.
More than full-time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Derrick, can you talk to us a little bit about the populations that you serve and sort of the unique barriers that they face, and how Chief Seattle Club works to overcome those barriers?
Sure, yeah. I think I didn't go into depth there. With Chief Seattle Club, also we target the urban Native population in this area, and all the great cities in the country have a very, the disparity for Native Americans and homelessness and the needed services are great. A lot of that's due to bad policy and the 600 years of oppression. What we provide at Chief Seattle Club is culturally appropriate services and the need for it. Like I'm sure you've heard many times, probably maybe even from me, that one of the things that we always talk about at the Chief Seattle Club is, Native Americans are 1% of the population, the general overall population of the region, but we make up 15% of the homelessness rate, 32% of the chronic homelessness rate. Now that 15% homelessness rate, regardless of what you hear, it's that or more today, and that in itself is horrible enough. But one thing I always follow up with that. The data also shows us that we're least likely to receive or go get services from any other mainstream organizations, non-Native organizations, government offices like DSHS, other housing providers, shelters, and things like that. We actually, and a lot of that is because they don't provide culturally appropriate services. Our community is very unique in our trauma and our experiences we've had for 600 years, and it's not a pain Olympics. A lot of communities all suffered. It's not about who suffered worse or most, but everyone's unique and different. Ours, in particular, though, has left us in a very different level state that we're in today. Big lack of trust, mistrust of non-native systems. From the genocide from 600 years, the rape, the murder, the stealing of the lands, the forming of the U.S. government, to create a policy to take over further land, to steal our children and put them in boarding schools where they were molested and killed and everything else too. And that happened boarding schools are still alive today, although they're ran by natives and through the BIA. But so all that stuff too. Of the Relocation Act of the 50s, that's where the government enticed natives on reservations to come off your reservation lands, and we'll put you up in urban centers. We promised, they promised upward mobility, they promised job training, housing, all these different things that make you thrive, better life than what was on the reservations. All it was a poverty trap. We're still serving people at Chief Saddle Club who fell for that. 3 generations of poverty. Some never housed, never had housing stability ever. That in itself, that's really recent. Another one is a lot of people don't realize that even our women had sterilization against their consent up through the 70s. That's when I was a child. That's very, very recent, right? That's the way my elders and my aunties, uncles talk to me about those things, which I talk to my children about. There's a really deep mistrust of non-native systems that, whether it's government offices, even no matter what whether it was an honest help, putting a hand out to support, it doesn't matter. We've been burned so many times. So there's a big lack of trust of that. It takes a real indigenous approach to reach our community, to get them to accept help, to get them to trust. I didn't have time to talk about this. I'm also a Chief Saddle Club member. I consider myself a member more than an employee. 15 years ago, I went to the Chief Saddle Club, and I was homeless on the streets, alcoholic, drug addict. And it was the club that actually got me the help and the support I needed. I knew it was like being on the streets, refusing to go into other shelter systems. I'd rather sleep on the streets, right? And I know that sounds irrational. It wasn't just about drinking and drugging, although that was a big part of it too. But it was, I remember one time I went to one of the main shelters downtown, stood in line, was about to get in there. I could hear the chaos. I could know that there's no other native faces in there, and I felt unsafe. And I actually turned and walked around back out on the 3rd and went back out and probably went and got a bottle and went under a bridge. No, I slept in Occidental. But that's neither there nor there. But so that's what we provide at Chief Saddle Club, and the importance of actually reaching our community. And we've tried over and over again. We butt our heads against the wall with so many different agencies, organizations about if you're going to reach our community, if you truly want to attack the disparity, you got to listen to us. You got to help us. You got to let us develop whatever program, outreach thing you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to leave us marginalized. Every time the system always wants to create a one-size tool fits all for the sake of efficiency, and it makes sense, I guess, in a logic model. But every time they do, the Native community will always get further and further pushed to the margins and be left out. Every time a policy's made, we have to have indigenous carve-out to actually, otherwise we're going to get further harmed. Anyways,
appreciate that. And Erin, you're coming to this from a housing perspective. I wonder what, we're here in the middle of a homelessness crisis. What are you seeing in terms of the barriers that are out there, and what is being done about these barriers to housing, or what's in development?
Yeah, I'll say one of the things that I've recognized is that traditionally we've not listened. I just want to affirm all the things that Derrick just shared around distrust. Communities, particularly Native and Black communities, have not trusted these institutions and systems to, one, listen to them and take heed to what they've been telling them. And so, Derrick is saying we need to have an indigenous approach. That's what we've been hearing to this day as we have been enhancing our community engagement with folks. That is what we constantly hear. Our contracting process needs to have an indigenous approach. Our requests for proposals need to have an indigenous approach, a culturally specific approach. And so we're striving now to incorporate that. And I think one of the things that, I'll just speak from a Black perspective, right? One of the things that we have also had to undo within ourselves, our way of being, is we have subscribed to white dominant culture, and we do have to explore what Afrocentric ways of being would look like when it comes to contracting, when it comes to service providership and the like. And so I think that is, there's space being made to do more of that exploration in our different communities. And so much of what Derrick just shared really resonates, and we do believe at King County Regional Homeless Authority that the answers do reside with those that are definitely in the experience, and that's why we have our theory of change that says we must center people with these experiences, with these very real experiences of homelessness, but also experiences of racism, sexism, and all the other isms that our communities are having to deal with. We must center their voices and experiences in order for us to get this right. So, thank you. Yeah.
Well, and then just before we move on to talk a little bit about the why and how we can solve these barriers, I just wanted to open up to anybody on the audience or in the panel to talk about different kinds of barriers that we haven't quite touched on yet. No? Okay. Well, this is a big question, and I know we've talked a little bit about it in the back, but why are there all these barriers? Why are they built into these systems? And Derrick, I think, touched on a lot of the main reasons right now, but I'd like to hear from other folks on the panel. I guess in a ideal world, when you need help, you're able to get it. But that's clearly not the system we're working in. And why is that? Marcy, can I ask you to jump on that one?
I know. It's like, do you want it, Erin? You can have it, Erin.
Playing double dutch. No, go ahead, Marcy.
Okay. All right. I think one thing that's become abundantly clear to me as we've done this work is that, policies and programs are, yes, they're systems, and we talked about this a lot in the back, so I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, Erin. But like systems are made up of people. And they're made up by people, and laws are made by people. They're passed by people. Congress, we can call it Congress, and it's like a thing that's way over there on the other coast, but it's made up of people, and they make decisions, and they come to those decision-making times with all of the baggage that's in the air around us. So I think you see these places where there's like racism and sexism that are deeply built in and embedded and baked into our public infrastructure. They're baked into our laws. They're baked into how we serve people. And it doesn't just stop when the law happens. I mean, I think as we've made abundantly clear already, I think about I work a lot at the state level. So there's the state legislature that makes the laws. There's some of that stuff that's baked in as they make the law, but then it goes to a state agency to implement. And there's whole other group of people there that take their biases and incorporate them into how they implement the policy, how they write an application for the policy, how they make it available, how they do or don't do outreach for that. And so you end up with all of these places where people's conscious or unconscious bias are seeping into the very fabric of our safety net, for lack of a better, just to keep the metaphor going of the fabric, but they're all there. And I think, to me, that's like, sometimes that makes me feel really overwhelmed. Like, oh my God, like it's like thousands of people whose minds we have to change and who we have to think about differently. But that also gives me a lot of hope that they're people and that there are there are decisions that people made, but there's also a new set of decisions we can be making. There's decisions we can unmake and remake and do things differently. But I think big picture, when I think about why do these barriers exist, I think about like that we had maybe didn't do enough critical thinking as we are like creating laws and not questioning our biases, not questioning the why do we feel like we need to have 6 different verification processes throughout the year in order to make sure that somebody can access $30 to pay for some food? Like, why did we do that? What assumptions did we bring into the lawmaking process where we created that and put that into law? And then that nobody questioned it at the administrative side when it got to an agency, like, do we really need 6? Do you know how much more we have to pay for 6 people over the course of the year to verify these 6 things? Like, that doesn't actually make logical sense, let alone like philosophical, like justice sense. So that's my why. Erin, jump in on Double Dutch.
I mean, I guess what I would just want to reinforce is that we are the people who make up the systems and institutions. And we are the ones that have been a part of like knotting up the system, and we are the ones that are going to be the ones who need to unknot the system. Because people are truly suffering with all of our policies, our procedures, our practices that are really getting in the way of many of the things that you've shared, around your navigation of the process. I mean, for us to at KCRHA, because we've seen it as a barrier, people having a challenging time navigating the system. Now we have a full system navigation team, right? Of 40 plus people. Just think about how much, it takes to hire on all those people to help people living on the streets tap into services. I think that's just mind-blowing. I think we also, Neal and I have talked about it as well, like many of our providers and people who provide direct services have to go and create a program to deal with the knotted up system. It's ludicrous, right? And so I think we need to really get to a place where we start to examine the system, all the foots, which is what we call the systems and institutions are foot of oppression on people who are experiencing homelessness, or really poor people, Black and brown folks. Like these systems and institutions, education system, the transportation system, government, nonprofit, you said BIA earlier, all of these different systems that, like you said, have to interact with on a day-to-day basis, full-time, beyond full-time job, just to get basic needs met, right? And I so appreciate you sharing your experience, and you layer that. I just want to layer it real quick. You layer it with being a woman. You layer it with being Black. You layer it with being trans. You layer it with being a person living with a disability. You layer it with being formerly incarcerated. It's nearly impossible to live. And a lot of our missions have things like empowerment and to thrive and all of those things. But how can a person thrive when they have all of those layers and layers and layers? And you talk about the experience that people have when they have to, engage with these different, I'll just say, institutions and programs, right? And so yeah, it's a full-on conversation that we won't get to in 90 minutes, but I do believe that it is a practice of ours to be systems thinkers, because we have to figure out where those knots exist and dismantle them. And I believe we can do it. I wouldn't be in this work. I know none of us would be serving in the different capacities that we're in if we didn't believe that it could be undone. But I do think that there is a reorientation of the mind to understand that these systems and institutions are made up by people. And we gotta be really liberated gatekeepers in our day-to-day work in order to really unknot this system.
Well, and one of the things that I found that has helped me keep fighting the fight is that I recognize my privilege. I'm usually the same color as the person opposite me at the DSHS desk. And we're usually the same gender, so we're not a threat. And I speak fluent colonial, so we understand each other. And so if they're going to want to help anybody that day, it's very likely to be me. So I benefit from that. Even while I feel terrible about it and angry about it and sad, it's the truth. I don't know if there's a way to rebuild a system to adjust for that. It seems deeply human and deeply privileged human that it carries on the way it does. And you can never convince somebody with a privilege to give it up. You have to pry it out of their cold, dead hands. But, rather than dismantling and rebuilding, I think we have to construct something next to and have that next to construction informed by more points of view and more points of need, because you can't rebuild something this broken.
And Erin, you actually reminded me of a phrase you taught me the other day, which is that we are critical lovers of our work. which really resonates to me, because I think that is, even though we're up here being very critical of the system as it deserves, we're here because we love our work and we think it can be better. And I really appreciate you bringing that perspective. We are kind of moving into talking about how we get to solutions, how we make this system work better for folks. And I wonder if anybody has any thoughts about what that would look like. Kirk, I know you come to this from a whole bunch of different angles. You've worked on the governance committee for KCRHA. You have lived experience that informs your work, and you work as a case manager. I wonder, what would a barrier-free system look like, or a less barrier system?
That's a hard question.
It is.
Well, from the perspective of a homeless person, a formerly homeless person, I would say that people on the street, they need to see a pathway. They need to see a direction where they can go that leads to housing, that leads to a solution to their particular problem, right? A lot of the people that I spoke with while I was homeless, they just existed from day to day, from shelter to DSHS appointment, and you could tell that they were just beat up by the system. I mean, it wasn't like the system was not only ignoring them, but they felt attacked by the system, right? And so a lot of those folks decided to live off the grid. They decided to not participate in their own health and their own pathway back to housing. So I would say that what I needed back then was, number one, an education. I needed to know the system better, to be told, okay, this is how the system is working just for your particular set of problems and challenges. This is what you are looking at, and this is what's going to get you out of that situation. Now, of course, that's going to be different for people. There's so many different types of folks out there who are homeless and have different challenges that's not going to be the same story for everyone. But as a working professional in this field, I think it's incumbent upon us to actually know. I mean, we work with so many different types of folks. So after a while, after years of being in the system, you do learn that that people's problems, they're different, but they're not that different, really. Of course, you have to use things like the way you talk to people and the way that you protect their dignity when you provide services. Those things count, right? But mainly they have to have a pathway. Now that's, now I can, from there I'll just transition to my position, my former position on the KCRHA. I would say solutions, as far as that's concerned, that's huge. I mean, it's a gigantic issue, a big question. And I know that the KCHRA, they're doing so much these days to try and solve this problem. But just from my time on that board, I could see that the problem was a lot bigger than what I thought. It was just has tentacles everywhere in society and in the administration of homeless services, that it's just, you have to affect all those touch points, and you have to get people to agree. And if they can't agree, they have to at least be able to want to come halfway to create public policy or some kind of policy that will work for everyone in the region, right? There were differing opinions on that board, for sure, but it was healthy. It was always a healthy conversation, because I could tell that even though someone, say, from a different county or a different city would have a different approach to their problem or their way to solve homelessness, it was still a desire to solve homelessness, right? And so the decision that I had to make personally was to say, okay, well, I may not totally agree with this person on the board who's saying this is the way we should do it here. I know that there is a way that we can come together, have a meeting of the mind, so to speak, and get this thing solved. It may not be completely 100% how I thought it should be solved, and vice versa. But at least if we focus on the person, if we focus on the issues that the homeless person is having, then I think it's easier to make those concessions for the sake of the individual out there, right? Now, from a case manager point of view, as far as solutions go, I think that's probably the weakest position. The weakest, or at least maybe the least effective perspective, because I know from my job that I go to every day that I work within a system, within several systems, right, and within a hierarchy, right. And so I talk to people. Like the other day, I was talking to a gentleman who had an issue with his phone, and he couldn't get his phone to work. He had bought a phone card and didn't know how to add the phone minutes to his phone. Yeah. And that took me like an hour because you call these guys up and it's like they just, you're on hold and all these different things, and folks that come into the office and they don't have the time or the patience. I mean, they've been hit by 4 or 5 other different major problems that they can't solve, and they come into your office with this little thing and you think, okay, this is not that big of a deal, but it is to them, right? It's a major issue for them. And so I guess my point is that when I am looking at solving these smaller, from my perspective as a case manager, these small issues with people, I have to also do that in concert with the way that my colleagues do it and the way that my supervisor wants me to do it and how Solid Ground as a whole thinks I should do it. And there are limitations to that. I mean, there are communications limitations. There are things that don't get communicated. They filter down, and when I hear it, it's not quite the same thing that that maybe was mentioned at some higher up meeting. And so you have to pay attention. You have to ask questions, and you have to want to be able to work within that system effectively. So, as far as, solutions go, I just don't know if it's really within the purview of a case manager to solve systemic issues. But as far as talking to people and solving a person's DSHS problem or their SSI benefit problem, I don't know. You do the best you can, and you make sure that you treat people with dignity. I guess that's really all I can say. I don't know. Probably lots more to say about it, but
If I may just add something to what Kirk is saying, one of the things that I've found really beneficial is how the Lived Experience Coalition strives to bring people in, but also raise their consciousness around what's been done to them, right? So that they could rid themselves of the, I'll call stinking thinking around I did this to myself, or I'm the reason. And really understanding how the system is set up. So when you teach people how the system is set up, it reorients their minds. And I've seen how powerful it's been to have people with lived experience on these boards, people with lived experience who are going to these council meetings and decision-making meetings, giving public comment, and really how it has shifted the culture and the energy and the mindsets, and also the ultimate decision-making, because they are gaining the clarity that they have needed to advocate on their behalf. Because many times they have other people speaking on behalf of or advocating on behalf of, when in actuality, when a person has that awakening, they can speak up for themselves, And so I just wanted to speak to just how powerful it is to for people to understand what's been done to them and how they can come to these different council meetings and coalition meetings and advocate for themselves and others.
Can I piggyback off of that one? Because, I've worked with a lot of people to help prepare them to speak at a hearing or testify in some way or meet with a legislator. And I train staff to help other people do that. And, a thing that I've often found myself saying as I'm working with staff to get them ready to help somebody else do this is, you think you're going to go in and have a conversation about the talking points. That's what you think in your mind that you're going to do. But what you're really going to do is you're going to spend maybe 10% of time on the talking points because it's their story and they know it. But what you're going to spend 90% of your time on is helping make sure that they feel confident and prepared and know what to expect to go in and tell that story to some legislators or to some people in power. What happened? How long are you going to have? How do you know when your time is almost up? That at the legislature, they have a little light system, and I still get tripped up, but when the red light comes on telling me it's time to shut up. And I've done it 100 times, And so I think there's that I think is really important, the sort of the training of this has been done to you. you also have the power to change that, but also the recognition that it is difficult to do. I think because, some of us who have privilege to have had experience doing that, like maybe that doesn't feel as intimidating to us because we haven't been told all these horrible things about us by our systems. And I think the ability to speak up and speak forward like does take sort of an extra dose of like, okay, I'm gonna come and tell something really hard, and I'm gonna have to swallow my nervousness about that and be ready to present and push back on something I've been told probably my entire life. So I do think that's important. As it's like some simple barriers that I heard Kirk talk about a little bit that I was hoping I could pull out a little bit is, and actually, Hannah, I'm thinking of you when I say this, is the wait times when you call to do some of these like income verification things. You can be on the phone for 6 hours. And sometimes on that 6th hour, if it's 5 o'clock, you just get cut off and you can try again tomorrow, right? And I think about like, if I'm calling a customer service line and they're that backed up, like I get to say like, okay, I'm gonna enter my phone number and some customer service representative is gonna call me back in whatever time their system tells me. And that usually works, but that's not how our systems are set up. Like you just wait and wait and wait until somebody can can serve you. So that I think is sort of one kind of tangible piece of things that we can address is how do we make our customer service better on like those wait times? How do we like use the technology that's already available in the private sector and like apply that to the public sector? And that's like a simple thing, but it matters. Like people don't have, if people's phone cards are not working, they're not gonna use their precious phone minutes sitting on hold for 6 hours. I wouldn't sit on hold for 6 hours. And then I think the other thing that you flagged is just how complicated the wording is on applications, on letters asking you to verify things. It's technically in English, technically, but I know I've personally, and I'm guessing this has happened to you as a case manager, have been like, somebody's just handed me a letter and be like, I don't know what this says. Will you tell me what it says? Right. Like I can read the words on the page, but I don't know what it means, and I don't know what it means to my family.
I see a hand back there. Do you have a mic?
Yes, I do.
Great.
I'm kind of know the answer to this, and maybe you all aren't the right people to ask. But Marcy, what you just said it kind of struck something with me. So the customer service piece is a really important part of the system, right? Because there are so many touch points with the system, right? There are people, as you described, on the other end of the system providing that customer service. And it seems like it would benefit everyone, including those people who are working those jobs, to have better customer service systems set up so that it was more pleasant for them, it was more pleasant for the individual who's seeking help. Why? Like, what is that barrier, and why can't we figure out a way to make things work better for everyone, for the system and for the people who need to access the system?
I know that's addressed to me, but if anyone else wants to, oh, go for it, yeah.
Ooh, I know this one. Because I'm not their customer. I'm a nuisance. I'm asking for something I don't deserve. That's what I am. So if I have to wait and burn up a bunch of phone minutes and then get hung up on 10 minutes into the conversation, so I have to start over, oh well, will it teach me not to call? Maybe. It hasn't so far, but it's happened. It's happened often enough that I wonder if that's not the point. But no, we are not customers. We are not consumers. We are leeches, for lack of a better word, and we are to be picked off and discarded. Short answer.
I think I'd add to that when I first got hired at Solid Ground, I used to work out at North Seattle College, and out there is a DSHS office at the college, and I remember going to some of their meetings, and I distinctly remember the leadership of some of the leadership of DSHS. Their words really had a major effect on their workers, and it seemed to me that if the the manager of a certain department felt a certain way, it kind of came out in their dialogue, and the people under that person would kind of imbibe that attitude, right? Luckily, my experience there was that there were both. There were more managers that cared, and they wanted to provide good customer service for their people, for the people they were serving. And so I did notice that, but I took note that the leadership in those different departments at DSHS, they had a major impact and effect on how their workers saw the people they were serving. So as a point, I would say if there is something to be done, it would be to contact and speak with the leadership of those different departments so that they can a better affect how their underlings work for them and how they work for the public.
Well, maybe, and for they themselves to have an individual performance plan, like in the private sector.
I'll add on top of that, for our Native community, it's not just about the customer service, because you have really great social workers out there that are talking to, but again, I'm going to bring up the culturally appropriate services, right? You have to have that. Like I said, Native Americans don't utilize DSHS office as much as they should. If their food stamps run out, they're not going to go and get recertified. Luckily for the state of Washington, the state has a court signed with the local tribes of the state, and also certain tribal organizations. Chief Seattle Club is one of them. Hannah, you remember Will Ward, who came to the club every day, Monday through Friday. We had a DSHS employee, a Native man, and then after he moved, a Native woman, come down to right now we're still kind of closed down from pandemic and a remodel, but we had them come down Monday to Friday, 8 to 12 every day. It was probably the busiest person, and Hannah, it was always busy on Fridays, all packed, right? Because so many Natives got kicked off regularly for, all kinds of BS reasons off the system, right? That's the things we got to fix, but that's what it was. So it wasn't just the fact that it was a Native employee by DSHS. It was also done in a culture appropriate way, it was at the Chief Seattle Club. It was at our relatives' home. They're homeless. Our club, we look at it as a home for our people, and that's how they view it too. They felt comfortable, safe, a place where they could open up and talk about their issues, right? They don't got no food stamps, so they don't, they need to sign up for some other benefit, and they were in a place of safety. So, culture appropriate services.
And we have to wrap it up pretty quick here, but I do want to, that kind of leads us out in a good direction is, I want to open up, is there any other reasons for hope that we're moving in the right direction? Any other things happening that are getting us closer to a system where people can get the support they need without jumping through a whole bunch of hoops to get there?
And Neal, we have one question.
Oh, do we have one? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Jill Geary. I'm a former school board director for Seattle Public Schools, and one of the things that I noticed in trying to serve our population was that a lot of the poverty services in this area, in this city, were located central to south. And what we find is a growing poverty population up north, which Kirk is probably best aware of. I'm a North Seattle person as well. And what I saw as one of the barriers is that because of the grant writing system and the nonprofit system, of course, you're working to get your numbers through the door. So the nonprofits are going to be located where they see the historical pockets of poverty so they can serve the most people, get the numbers necessarily to apply to the grants. But when you have a northern population and a really high real estate market, it's hard for them to have two storefronts. And so I would talk to City Council and parks about how do you start designing new park spaces, new community centers that make it clear to the nonprofits that they are welcome to come in and provide services where they're not having to incur exorbitant costs. They can get their numbers up for their grant writing, and they can serve the populations that are becoming more spread out in our region. And I was just wondering, has anybody talked to the city about that? What are we doing? Because I totally agree, the barrier is proximity. And if you're making people go through a city that is jammed up in order to access, we're going to have people spread out and just making do where they are. And it seems like something that could be solved through the access of spaces that we make publicly available throughout our city.
That's a really great question. Thank you. Does anybody have any thoughts about geographically locating services?
I mean, I think it's point well taken. I know this, I guess this is a little bit of I have several things that give me hope, so I won't take up the whole time. But, I know that I have heard a growing awareness of this challenge. I work mostly at the state level, so I don't know as much about kind of what's happening at the local level, but I do know that DSHS, for example, is trying really hard to explore different partnerships with different nonprofits and being really creative for DSHS to think about where can we increase our partnerships, where do we have a lack of services available, can we offer a mobile option there, trying to figure that out. So that's not, again, I can't speak to the local things because I mostly work at a state level, so others feel free to weigh in. But I do know that people are trying to think about that creatively. I'm going to let others answer that, and then I can come back to the hope question, because I've been doing this work for a long time, and if I didn't have hope, I wouldn't still be here. So I want to be sure we get to some of that. But
I'll just say, I know I've been a part of some conversations around place-based services, and so there are a lot of conversations being had right now, and I know that there are some things that are currently in our proposed budget that is in the process of being approved that will meet those very specific needs. And I know that we also have our sub-regional planning team that is all over our county. So we have a representative for the city of Seattle. We have somebody for the South End, somebody for East King County, and we also have somebody for the North part of King County. And so I know that those conversations are being had, and I thank you for lifting that up. And I think we just need to actualize what that really means. What does it mean to have place-based programming so folks don't have to spend all day, right, getting their needs met. So thank you.
Marcy, did you want to jump on reasons for hope?
Sure. I mean, please don't let me be the only one who gives reasons for hope. I really hope others can weigh in on this. I think at a state level, I've really seen sort of a growing understanding of the importance of listening to people who have lived experience. So that's one thing. Legislation passed last session that will go into effect in 2023 around compensation for people with lived experience as they participate in agency councils and boards and participate in those services. So the guidelines, there's draft guidelines out right now around how do agencies actually do that. And I will say that they did the right thing, and they formed a lived experience coalition to help create the guidelines for doing lived experience compensation. So that effort is housed in the state's new Office of Equity, which is really trying to also do the state's agency work through an anti-racist lens. And so I think that those two things in and of itself are probably the biggest changes I've seen in my time working at the legislature. I'm going into my 18th legislative session. Around looking at this underlying structure and how do we do this sort of engagement? How do we talk about our work differently rather than just have it's about the legislators, their perspectives, and the budget, and that's it. And sort of only people on the outside saying, hey, we need to think about this differently. So that gives me some hope that we've been talking about that differently. I've also seen some state agencies and some legislators really have a broader conversation about what cash assistance means. Over the last couple years during the pandemic, we had cash assistance. The federal government gave out stimulus checks. There was an expanded child tax credit. There was some expansions to the federal earned income tax credit, and those were all sort of unrestricted cash things that were not that hard to get. They were not barrier-free, I will not say that, but they were much easier to get than most of our cash assistance programs. And I think we learned a lesson from that, which is maybe it doesn't have to be this hard. We could actually do this, and we have mechanisms to do it, and we should be exploring those and talking about doing that more. And that conversation, I think, is ongoing at the state level. Including, I know that there's folks who care a lot about GBI, or Guaranteed Basic Income. Last year, the legislature put in some funding to look at a feasibility study, or to do a feasibility study, on what it would look like to do a statewide GBI. Again, the group that came together to do that study included people with lived experience on their steering committee to write that feasibility study. That feasibility study's out. it's quite good, in my opinion, and legislators are looking at it, and there's a GBI bill that will come forward in this session. Whether the state feels like it has the resources to fund that is a different matter, but if you would have asked me 5 years ago if there was an opportunity to have a conversation about a guaranteed basic income across the state in Washington, I probably would have laughed. Like, I would have had this exact same reaction that Kirk just had. So, that these conversations are actually moving and people want to talk about it, and people recognize that a key reason to have these conversations is all the barriers that we've talked about, as well as the value of cash to people is really encouraging to me. So those are some things. I'll stop there for now and let others talk about hopes.
Yeah, I can comment on that. I would want to also stress and reiterate the fact that systems, I believe, are changing now because of the fact that legislators, lawmakers, leaders, people in leadership positions are starting to value lived experience. I mean, that's just, it's kind of, it's like diversity in the 90s, right? It was this new thing that changed everything, right? Only this is way more powerful because now you actually have people with lived experience in those boardrooms, in those rooms where decisions are being made about public policy. And that's really where the rubber hits the road. I mean, if you can be like me, for example, I myself was a person who was on the board of the KCRHA as a lived experience person, one of three. And it was an amazing experience for me. I did not know I could talk to Dow Constantine about my issues or represent issues from a homeless standpoint and be listened to by these folks. It was incredible for me, life-changing actually. It gave me a new perspective it gave me hope that if I can be in this room doing this, then this is something that's never been done before, right, ever. And so as long as I'm up on my game and I can talk about these things in an intelligent way, or at least in a way that gives them an idea that from a perspective that they haven't considered before, never experienced before, then I'm doing my job. And so I would say that what I see as a major factor of hope is that people with lived experience can now be in the same room as council members, as governors, as Dow Constantines of the world, those kind of folks. So I think that's a really, really big deal.
Any more reasons for hope from the panel?
I mean, yeah, I have to. I must. I guess I would say reasons for hope is this very panel right here, this very engagement that we're having today, and the continuous conversation around how we can be anti-racist in the work that we do. And the conversation that I did have with Neal was around being critical lovers of the work that we do. We must be critical lovers of the work that we do. We must be good listeners. We must be good stewards of the people's dollars. Like, we are generating millions of dollars on the backs of people who are living this very real experience. And so we must do right by the people, right? And so one of the things that I just wanted to lift up that is giving me hope is one of the most recent announcements that we made, which was the landlord incentive package, which is really incentivizing the landlords to open up their units to people who have been living outside. Make a way, reduce those barriers, not reduce, get rid of them. Just get rid of them. We don't need you to, look at a person's background to justify whether they can be housed or not, right? And so we are in conversation with our landlords, people who own property within the city and the county, to open up their doors, right? And really supporting people as they transition into housing. And so I would encourage folks to go on our website and check out the landlord incentive package. Share that with your friends. Talk about it with others. We need people to open up their vacant units and allow folks to move in as we support people in their process of becoming housed. And just grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation.
Well,
One more thing.
My friend just reminded me about something else that I must share with you all in our approach of really getting folks inside and housed, especially in this extremely cold. We're not even in winter. It's still fall, and it is extremely cold out there. We have a housing command center that's located, I believe, off of Washington and 5th at the fire station. And every day, members of our staff, city staff, people with lived experience, they are down there at the Housing Command Center daily strategizing on how to get people housed, working with our system advocacy team. And they have opened it up to the public on Wednesdays. You can join them. They meet every day from 10 to 11:30, 90 minutes. But on Wednesdays, it's open to the public. So I encourage you all to go down there and check out the Housing Command Center. It's also on our website, how to get connected. You just fill out a form and say, hey, I'm coming down on Wednesday at 10, and they will welcome you in. So thank you so much for reminding me of that. Please do tap in.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your time and wisdom with us. Can I get a round of applause for the panel here? And thank you all for coming. It really means a lot to us to have you in community with us and to share these ideas. And look out for more social justice salons next year. We're already talking about a slate of new conversations. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Shalimar. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, everyone. I appreciated the ending of this conversation on hope. It gives me hope to see so many folks engaged in this conversation. I know we had folks that weren't able to attend today, but for those that were in the room today, thank you very much for giving your time and listening to our experts and their perspectives today. What we heard was that our systems are made up of people, and people carry their own baggage, and when they're developing policies and best practices and all these other things, like that comes into how they are developing those things, right? And then we also heard about this idea of like, who's really the customer, right? Kim dropped some knowledge, right? So this idea of like what do we do from here, right? So this idea of like, let's keep these conversations going. We have this recorded, and so we're gonna be sharing this link out. So please, get it out to your network, folks that weren't able to attend, that you feel like wanna kind of learn a little bit more. This is a great way to start. Send them that link to the recording, have a conversation. Call your legislators. We all work within systems, right? We may not be working in these particular systems that these folks have shared today, but we all are working within systems, right? So take a moment and think, is there something in our system that's not working right? Is there something in our system, whatever that system is, that's not working for all of our constituents? And then how do we fix that? And start to have those conversations in your personal lives and your professional lives, right? So that is, those are just some hopeful things that we can all do as we kind of exit this space and out into the world. And then, you heard from Derrick's organization at Seattle Club about what they're doing, right? And so this idea of like, how do we be able to tap into the other organizations, KCRH, these organizations that are really looking at how do we systematically change the systems that are happening. I know Derrick's looking for, board members, volunteers, all sorts of things. Same with Solid Ground. We heard an invitation. You can go down on Wednesdays and go see what's happening at the Housing Command Center in real time, what's happening there. So there's all sorts of ways to get involved. And of course, I wouldn't be a good CEO if I didn't say this. You can also donate money. So I think I got a board member in here. So by all means, if you would like to deposit some coins to help those that are trying to tear down these systems and trying to rebuild them, we will gladly take those. And so thank you again. Thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. We really do appreciate it. We've got some extra sandwiches and things back there. And please, let's give a round of applause to our panelists one more time. Thank you all.